This is the month of October. And in October, I'll call it Magical Month because that's when Harry Houdini passed away on Halloween Day. And magicians from all over the world honor him on this day by doing free magic shows. So what I wanted to do on Halloween was to do readings for kids. And with the pandemic going on, there's no way to do that, so I'm going to do it on video. So I actually got a couple of children's books I got off Amazon. We're going to focus first off on this book right here. This is actually an easy to read book. This one says level 2, ready to read for longer sentences, simple chapters, high interest vocabulary words. This is for kids to read, so it's give us a little basic idea of Harry Houdini, and then I'm going to do some excerpts from the other books that I have here. This is Harry Houdini Escape Artist, written by Patricia Lakin, illustrated by Rick Gary. The Harry Houdini book. Magician, escape artist, superhuman stuntman. Who was that? And more. Harry Houdini. Houdini's real name was Eric Weiss. He was born in Hungary when he was very young. Well, when he was very young, the family came to America. There you're on the boat. If you can recognize little Harry right here. They settled in Wisconsin. The family was very poor and could not always pay the rent, so they moved many times. Finally, they came to New York. Instead of going to school, Eric and his younger brother Theo had to work. There's poor Eric right there, transporting some stuff as a kid. But working had its bright side. Theo's boss showed him how to make a coin disappear. Theo showed the trick to 13-year-old Eric, and there's him holding the coin right here. I'll demonstrate a trick similar to what he probably did for Harry Houdini at the time. Now, after Theo showed him that trick, he said Eric was fascinated, and he did the trick very well. Eric had what magicians needed: quick, strong hands. From then on, Eric spent his free time learning new tricks. He knew that to be a really good magician, he had to be smart, strong, and sure of himself. There's all these tricks he's doing. What's he working on right there? It looks like a card trick. Being sure of himself helped at work, too. One December, Eric had a job as a department store messenger. He pinned a sign onto his uniform. It said, "Christmas is coming. Turkeys are fat. Please put a quarter in the messenger boys' hats." There's a drawing of Harry Houdini there. Eric hid the quarters in his thick hair, up his sleeves, and up his pant legs. Eric told his mother, "Shake me, I'm magic." Shiny silver quarters spun from his body and danced on the floor. Mother and son laughed for joy as they scooped up the rent money. There's Harry Houdini right there. His hair, the coins coming from his head just like that. Dropping from his hair onto the ground. Year after year, Eric worked at many jobs, and year after year, his passion for magic grew. There he's showing him doing some magic tricks and then working some regular jobs. Eric trained every part of his body. He needed both hands to be strong, so he spent hours tying and untying knots. His lung had to be strong, so he practiced holding his breath in the bathtub. He also trained his mind. He took apart locks and learned how they worked. His favorite library book was the world famous French magician, or was by the world famous French magician Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin, I call him. Eric added an I to the end of his idol's name. Eric's nickname, Harry, sounded like Harry. From then on, 17-year-old Eric Weiss was known as Harry Houdini. And this here is a drawing of Robert Houdin. Well, Robert Houdin is actually known as the father of modern magic. The typical image of a magician with a top hat and tails, and of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, Robert Houdin made that famous. After years of struggling, Houdini was finally famous. In 1912, a New York theater owner paid him $1,000 a week for his act. Houdini asked for his salary in coins. At home, he slowly spilled the glittering gold coins onto his mother's lap. Houdini said that this was his proudest moment. But he had much to be proud of in his career. People packed theaters to see his act. They filled the streets to see his stunts. Click, Houdini was handcuffed. Clank, he was tied up with locked chains and put into a box. Bam, the box was nailed shut. Splash, the box was thrown into the river. Crowds watched and waited, sometimes for hours. Would he escape alive? He always did, and without any help. But how? Houdini never told his secrets, but he never stopped using his head, his hands, and his heart. Now, of course, this book, being an easy reading book, doesn't cover everything about Houdini. There's another book here. This is a picture book of Harry Houdini, another kid's book. It was by David A. Adler and Michael S. Adler, illustrated by Matt Collins. In fact, it was even, looks like he even got this one signed by the author himself right here. Signed by the author even, which I didn't know that. Now, I'm not going to cover everything in this book because it would take too long. This is a much more difficult read for kids, but still a children's book. But I'm going to deal with right here. Turn to this page here, this picture of an elephant, when Harry Houdini actually made an elephant disappear. So it says here, on January 7th, 1918, in one of his greatest illusions, Houdini made a 10,000-pound elephant and her trainer disappear from a wooden cabinet. The matinee crowds will worry themselves into sleep, a newspaper reviewer noted, wondering what Houdini did with his elephant. Houdini refused to disappoint his audiences. Once while performing, he broke his ankle. Still, he insisted on finishing his show. What's interesting is that many more modern magicians have actually imitated Houdini in some of his illusions. Back during years ago on his television special, a man by the name of Doug Henning made an elephant disappear on national television. You can actually check that out. Something else about Houdini, again, is on Halloween Day, October 31st, 1926 is when he died. This is what happened to Houdini. Right here, he got punched in the stomach by someone. I was like, whoa, how did it happen there? Well, the story was, on October 22nd, 1926, he was in Montreal, Canada, performing. Some students came to his dressing room and asked if it was true that he was so strong he could take a punch without being hurt. Houdini said it was true. Then, before he could tighten his stomach muscles, one student punched him a few times. Houdini fell. Houdini was severely injured but still performed that day and the next. But on October 24th, 1926, he collapsed. Blows to his stomach had ruptured his appendix, which became inflamed and infected. A few days later, lying on a hospital bed, he whispered, "I'm tired of fighting. Guess this thing is going to get me." On October 31st, 1926, Harry Houdini died. His body was sent home to New York City on November 4th, 1926. More than 2,000 people attended his funeral. He was exceptional, a unique personality, the rabbi said at the service, and besides that, he was one of the noblest and sweetest of men. This is a picture of what it must have been like. I have a third book. This has got actually way more information on Harry Houdini. Again, another children's book. This one's Harry Houdini for Kids. His life and adventures with 21 magic tricks and illusions in it. Now this would take considerable time to read through, but I did pick a couple of parts in here that I thought were interesting about Harry Houdini. One about children. Now Harry and his wife Bess never had children, but being the entertainers that they were and being very creative individuals, the Houdinis were happy. They loved each other, deeply enjoyed working on the magic act together. They traveled a lot during shows, doing shows in strange towns and catching the train to the next. They didn't have any children, but seemed to wish they had some. Harry invented a pretend son he named after his father. He would write letters to Bess, passing them via the maid, telling her how the boy was doing in school and about his adventures growing up. Eventually, Harry quit writing the letters about the pretend son when the boy was elected president of the United States. At one time, Bess told a friend that she was sewing clothing for her pretend daughter who would wed soon. Now this is interesting. Though dogs seemed to take the place of children in the Houdini's lives. They had a succession of dogs that went everywhere with them. They packed a dog pillow in their trunk and took them along as they did shows across the country and in Europe. They were given their beloved Charlie in Europe, and later another dog would take his place, Bobby the handcuff escape dog. The Houdinis never did have children of their own. Another thing for Houdini did, besides doing escapes and magic tricks, was he actually got into flying. Back in 1903, the Wright brothers had made their historic first airplane flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. They were pioneers in the growing new field of aviation. Their flight had captured the world's attention and made them household names. Houdini knew he would gain tremendous publicity if he could somehow do an airplane stunt, but in 1908 he offered $5,000 to rent the Wright brothers' airplane. He planned to go aloft, handcuffed, and parachute from the plane, escaping from the handcuffs as he fell through the air, landing on the ground safely. The idea was eventually scrapped. Now, keep in mind, the Wright brothers' airplane couldn't fly that high as it is today. Today, of course, you can jump from an airplane at a much higher altitude, but the Wright brothers' plane wasn't capable of that, so he would have had way less time to try to escape before using the parachute. But his interest in aviation was kindled at that point. Air flight was something thrilling, death-defying, and sensational. So on a return performance tour of Europe in 1909, Harry and Bess went to the first great air meet in France. And there, he hired the best mechanic he could hire, somebody named Antonio Brassac, and then headed to Hamburg, Germany, where he actually purchased an airplane. He took the airplane all the way to Australia because he wanted to be the first man to fly, or person for that matter, to fly an airplane in Australia. But even though it was Australia, the weather wasn't cooperating with him. But finally, after nearly losing patience with the delays, everything was perfect for his flight. On March 18th, 1910, Harry took now he called it the Voisin, I can't pronounce that name, Voisin, aloft 3 times that morning. The first flight was short. The plane went up about 25 feet into the air, made a sweeping circle over the airfield, then touched down smoothly. He'd been in the air 1 minute. The second flight ended with a rough touchdown, and the third was again perfect. The last flight lasted 3.5 minutes, soaring more than 2 miles around the airfield, going at least 100 feet high. Harry touched down almost directly on the spot he had taken off from. So not only did Harry get into flying, but he also went into acting, if you can believe that. Houdini knew his action-type stunts would fit well with film. Magic and illusions weren't successful on film because the audience always suspected it was faked for the camera. Well, for the camera anyway. And there was none of the suspended disbelief that made a live magic show such fun to watch. But the movies were perfect for the kind of spectacular physical stunt work Houdini had invented. So, seeing a magic show in person, of course, is way more spectacular, interesting than watching it on television, even though, unbeknownst to Harry Houdini at this time, that a person by the name of Mark Wilson would actually make television a medium for magic shows. So in 1918, Houdini agreed to star in a movie called The Master Mystery. He played the role of Quentin Locke, the master detective. Quentin Locke was an early James Bond type character. And Locke battled an evil corporation. Now you can actually watch this on YouTube. It's called the Master Mystery. It's a silent film with the music playing in the background, a piano player, and things written on the screen. So it's kind of for a modern audience. For us, watching a silent film is a bit strange. He was also in other films as well. This was actually a 13-part serial, so you have to. So he even bought his own company, started his own production company. So because he liked his independence, so Houdini Picture Corporation is what he started. He made 2 films. His first year, The Man from Beyond, was about a man frozen in ice for a century who comes to life, and the other was Haldane of the Secret Service, about the son of a U.S. Secret Service agent who sets out to solve the mystery behind his father's murder. Now, an even lesser known thing about Houdini was he actually helped work as a spy for the Secret Service, not just as an actor. Houdini liked portraying secret agents in films probably because it was a bit like real life for him. Until recently, few people knew that Houdini worked as an undercover government agent when he toured Europe in the years just before World War I. In 2006, by William Kalush, Kalush, and Larry Schloman published The Secret Life of Houdini. It was the first book to reveal Houdini's hidden role as a spy. They found many documents proving Harry had begun working undercover for the British police during his first trip to London in 1900 as well. At that time, France, Britain, Germany, and the United States were all spying on one another. Really friendly, weren't they? It's likely that Harry began doing undercover work when he visited California in 1899. At that time, the U.S. Secret Service was trying to bust a large ring of counterfeiters who had flooded the region with fake silver dollars. The counterfeiters were using a mold made from a real silver dollar, and the fakes were very hard to pick out. So traveling entertainers like Houdini moved around the country, meeting lots of people and learning about local affairs. As Houdini headed to San Francisco, that trip he had pockets stuffed with silver dollars picked up in evening gambling games with other passengers. He had been trained to detect counterfeit gold and silver dollars. But because he also traveled to several European countries, frequently Houdini was useful to both the U.S. Secret Service and Britain's Scotland Yard. He spent time exploring police stations, prisons, jails, and security systems in every city he visited. Perhaps he could pick up useful information because Britain was suspicious of Germany years before World War I started. Scotland Yard authorities relied on Houdini's information gathered from tours there. Another thing Houdini was famous for was exposing these spiritualists who would do seances and pretend like they can bring back people from the dead to talk to grieving loved ones. So he attended 100 seances trying to find his mother's spirit, but nothing worked. He was also researching his book, and he figured out the tricks every medium was using. Nothing new, he wrote a friend. It is the same old routine. He was critical and suspicious, and the spiritualists began to resent him. He made many enemies. His book Miracle mongers and their methods has exposed entertainers such as sword swallowers and fire eaters, telling the long-held secrets behind such old feats. The public wanted more. They wanted Houdini to reveal the secrets of the spiritualist mediums. Even the New York Times urged Houdini to take up the project. The spiritualists had two reasons to resist Houdini: religion and money. Many believed spiritualists was a new religion and felt religious freedom should be protected. Mediums claimed the ability to contact ghosts was a gift from God. To say it was a trick was offensive. On the other hand, the mediums were out to make money, charging high fees from clients. It was common for frauds to prey on wealthy people who were lonely or had lost a loved one, working on them until their money was gone. If spiritualists were revealed to be fake, they would lose substantial income. So this book talks more about that. So there are many other books about Houdini out there. There's even a couple movies that was done about him. Your local library, and you can go onto Amazon and check out different books on Houdini. Very interesting character, but this is call this magical month, when Houdini died on Halloween night, or Halloween. I don't know what time when it was night or day that he died, but he died on Halloween. And so I hope you enjoyed this, and support your local magician.